are they nervous? Because the Attorney General has appointed a prosecutor to look into the investigation. And not only that, Fox News is reporting that their sources are telling them that John Durham, who is the prosecutor, is U.S. Attorney from Connecticut, that William Barr has named, has been on the job for weeks already, which does not surprise me. Greetings and welcome. It's great to have you. We're off and running for yet another 3 hours of broadcast excellence here at the famed Limbaugh Institute. Telephone number, if you want to be on the program, 800-282-2882. Here is a little rundown on this guy, and I'll just give it to you from a compendium of sources, including the New York Times. They say that the Attorney General has assigned John Durham, U.S. Attorney in Connecticut, to examine the origins of the Russia investigations. This guy has a long history. Mr. Durham has a long history of serving as a special prosecutor investigating potential wrongdoing among law enforcement and national security officials. He was appointed to the federal bench in 2017 by President Trump. But Mr. Durham has even investigated the use or misuse of FBI informants. In fact, one of his best-known investigations was an investigation of the FBI's handling of the mass murderer and Boston mobster Whitey Bulger. This is very significant. It was Robert Mueller III. Keep in mind, we've talked about this a few times, but it's been a while, and I don't know how many of you are going to remember this. It was Robert Mueller III, Mr. Integrity, Mr. Honorable, who kept 4 innocent people in prison for decades in order to keep Whitey Bulger from being exposed as an FBI informant. 4 people. 4 people who were innocent were kept in jail for years in order to protect the status of Whitey Bulger as an FBI informant. There were allegations back in the late 1990s that the FBI informants, Whitey Bulger and his partner Stephen Flemmi, had corrupted their FBI handlers. So in 1999, Janet El Reno named John Durham as a special prosecutor to investigate the FBI's Boston office's informants. Durham formed a task force and brought in FBI agents from other offices. In December 2000, Durham revealed secret FBI documents that convinced a judge to vacate the 1968 murder convictions of 4 other FBI informants because they had been framed by Robert Mueller's FBI. In 2007, to help protect Whitey Bulger from being exposed as an FBI informant, that's what all of those people were kept in jail for. The documents helped Salvatore Limon and their families of the 2 other men who had died in prison win a $101.7 million civil judgment against the government. Robert Mueller III. How did the guy ever end up being the special prosecutor? Kept 4 innocent people in jail for years to protect the informant status of Whitey Bulger, a mass-murdering Boston mobster who ended up dying in California. And it ended up costing the government $100 million plus in civil judgments. So if you ask me, Barr could not have picked a man with better experience. Not only has Durham gone up against the FBI and won before, and even Mueller, he has investigated the FBI's use of informants, which played a large role in the inception of the FBI's case against the Trump campaign. As we all, this seems like an inspired choice. And as I say, Fox News is reporting that their sources are telling them that John Durham has been on the job for weeks. The U.S. attorney appointed to examine the origins of a Russian investigation has been working on his review for weeks. A person familiar with the process told Fox News today he is there to probe all intelligence collection activities related to the Trump campaign during the 2016 presidential election. So this has a lot of people very, very nervous. In addition to this, now that Trump has named John Durham, look, he's not called a special counsel, but he may as well be one. And let me reiterate, this guy's experience is investigating the FBI, investigating informants and their use, investigating the corruption in the FBI. And don't forget, he found that Robert Mueller kept 4 people, innocent people, in jail for years to protect the informant status of Whitey Bulger, and those people ended up suing their families. 2 of them died in jail, by the way. 2 of them got out once this was discovered, and there was a series of civil suits that cost the government $100 million. Well, a little tour of the audio soundbite roster today will show what a home run this choice is. First, let's start on CNN today. John Berman. Address lrushbo@eibnet.us. Now, I want to clarify something I said about Mueller. I was technically right, but I left something out of this involving the 4 people, the innocent people who were framed and kept in jail, put in jail and kept there for years in order to protect the informant status of the Boston mobster Whitey Bulger. Mueller was not there when they were framed and put in jail, but he found out and nevertheless kept them in jail after it was learned that they were innocent. Mueller had to know they were innocent of what they were convicted. He was still writing to the parole board urging that they be kept in prison. He didn't have a hand in putting them there. I just want to specify that the operation was not totally his. He didn't put them there, but he learned that they were innocent, wrote the parole board to keep them there in order to protect the Bureau's informant status of Whitey Bulger. And again, the only reason why there's not only reason, but the reason this matters is that one of the investigators who discovered this and had the guts to report this was the lawyer that Barr has named today to investigate the investigation, John Durham. So that this is why I'm making a deal about this. But again, I do, Mr. Snerdley, I'm continuing. I'm getting emails. I don't care about the guy's resume, Mr. Limbaugh. I want results, dude. I want results. I've been hearing resumes for all of my life, and what has that gotten us? I'm sympathetic. Pete, great to have you, Pete. How are you?
I am fine, Rush. It's an honor to talk to you.
Thank you very much, sir.
The sin that those 4 fellows committed was not being swamp dwellers. They were probably...
Wait. Hang on. He's talking about the 4 people that were innocent that were kept in jail by Mueller so as to protect Whitey Bulger's informant status. Okay, these 4, they were not swamp dwellers, you're saying.
So in that case, Mueller's crime was a crime of omission, not of commission, if comparing it to sins. And crimes are comparable to sins. Now, if your memory is a little longer, you'll remember these people that were referred to as the White House Travel Office.
I remember that, yeah.
And I find it very comparable. They probably weren't the same type of people, but they were not at the level where you would consider them swamp dwellers. They were just on the edge. And since Hillary needed those positions for her friends to occupy...
Wait, what has this got to do? What does the travel office have to do with these people that were kept in jail by Mueller?
Same notion.
What notion?
You're inconvenient to the swamp dwellers. We will take care of you one way or another. There's one set of rules for people like truck drivers and garbage men and whatever, and farmers.
That's not the point. That's not the point of my telling the story. The point of this, I don't care who the four are, whether they're swamp dwellers or not. Mueller didn't keep them in jail because they're swamp dwellers. He kept them in jail because he valued the informant status of a mass-murdering Boston mobster more than the innocence of four people he knew were innocent. It's not whether they're swamp dwellers or not. The point is that here we have Mr. Honor, Mr. Integrity, Robert Mueller, running this 2.5-year investigation of Donald Trump and whether or not he's fit to be in office. Did he collude with Russia? Did he obstruct justice? Is he evil personified? Does he deserve to be thrown out? That's the whole point of this. Actually, it wasn't. The whole point was to find a mechanism to get rid of him because they don't like the guy. It wasn't even about his fitness. It was just about the fact they don't like the guy, and they're mad that he won, that he outsmarted them. And the guy trying to find evidence sufficient to get rid of Trump is the same guy who let four innocent people languish in jail. 2 of them died in jail in order to protect his investigation. He wasn't even getting at the truth. He had 4 people in jail for doing something they had not done, and he didn't put them there, but he kept them there. And the point is, if we're trying to arrive at the truth of things, this is not the guy to do it. Now, I know what you're saying. You're saying they were not swamped, they're average Americans, and that's why they were allowed to rot in jail. If they had been special elitists, then Mueller would have found a way to let them out. That Whitey Bulger was important because he was identifying serious criminals, and they were much more valuable to get than these 4 guys' innocence was. But the point, no matter how you slice this, is that the investigator who discovered that these 4 people were innocent and were kept in jail despite that has now been appointed to investigate Mueller and the FBI and the DOJ to find out if this investigation of Trump was legit. It's a means of expressing who this guy is, what he's discovered in the past, what he's capable of discovering, and then after he learns it, he reports it. I mean, this guy could have, after learning what he learned about the case here, he could have hidden it. He could have said nothing. He could have protected Mueller. He could have protected the people that were instrumental in keeping 4 innocent people in jail for decades. 2 of them died in jail, but he didn't. He reported the truth. The whole point of all of this today is to suggest that this guy, who Barr has appointed, is the guy to get to the bottom of it, whether elites or non-swamp dwellers are involved. Here's Dean in Valparaiso. All right, let me give you even more detail on the FBI Mueller investigation, the Whitey Bulger thing, so that you know the full scope of this. Because it has nothing to do with class swamp dwellers versus protecting the elites. The 4 guys, I'm going to start at the end of this. The 4 guys were kept in prison. 2 of them died in prison. 4 innocent people were kept in prison on purpose to keep it from coming out that 6 FBI guys were on the mafia payroll, on the Whitey Bulger payroll. This was another example of the investigators protecting themselves, just like Mueller was protecting Stroke Smirk and Lisa Page until the leak of their texts got out. Then he had to fire them. And there were other stories, books that were written about the other investigators on his team that were also compromised, had also suborned perjury, but he didn't get rid of them because those leaks didn't make the mainstream media. Now, Mueller did not railroad these 4 innocent people. It's important to emphasize this. He did not railroad these 4 innocent men into prison, 2 of them onto death row, for a Chelsea murder that they did not commit back in 1965. The frame job was handled by the Boston office of the FBI, where at one point, at least 6 FBI agents were taking payoffs from organized crime. And that's what had to be covered up. It wasn't just that Whitey Bulger was an informant, but that he had corrupted FBI agents. That's what Mueller wanted to protect. And so 4 innocent people were kept in jail, knowing they were innocent. 2 of them died while in jail, so that the FBI, Mueller, could keep the secret that a bunch of FBI agents in the Boston offices were accepting payoffs from the Boston Mafia. And that was another reason why this whole thing was covered up. And it was the investigator that that Barr has hired to investigate this investigation who uncovered all of this, or part of it. You know, the point here is that he could have swept it under the rug, too, to protect the FBI, to protect the DOJ, to protect all these people, but he didn't. We now know what we know, largely because of John Huber's investigation into this. So it has nothing to do with protecting swamp dwellers or sacrificing swamp dwellers, non-elites. This was about the FBI, in this case, protecting itself. And look, they had the power to do it, they had the will to do it, and it took a special prosecutor to unravel it all. Well, I submit to you the same thing happened here in this investigation. The lead investigator for Mueller is a guy named Andrew Weissman, who participated in the Enron task force, and every conviction he got was overturned by the Supreme Court, in some measure because of prosecutorial misconduct. The same people ran the Ted Stevens case, which was also thrown out after he had been found guilty. These same lawyers suborned perjury of their star witness, a contractor in Alaska. Ted Stevens was thrown out of office for supposedly accepting $150,000 in free remodeling work at his home. And the FBI agents looking into the prosecutors got the contractor to lie. And Ted Stevens was convicted. And it was found out that the contractor had been told to lie. He had been told to recite, that's the word, the prosecutor, recite what we want you to say rather than testify. They have the power to do it. The government wins 95% of its cases in federal court, maybe more. The judges know the prosecutors. They see them all the time. The defense lawyers, maybe all the time, but not nearly as often as the prosecutors. There's a much tighter relationship. The judges believe the prosecutors. Prosecutors take advantage of that. And so they were able to get away with it. When it got to the Supreme Court, the Enron convictions were overturned, and the Ted Stevens case was overturned by the judge who presided over it. And he required an investigation. Well, a lot of these people ended up on Mueller's investigation of Trump, led by Andrew Weissman and a whole bunch of them. And most of them were Hillary donors, and most of them were Hillary supporters. And Strzok, Smirk, and Page were also on Mueller's investigation team, and he knew that they had an anti-Trump bias because everybody on his investigation team did have an anti-Trump bias, which is one of the first red flags why this thing should have been shut down. Why is every lawyer on Mueller's team, why is every investigator either hate Trump or a Hillary Clinton donor? It was the first red flag. So in the Boston case, 4 innocent people were knowingly kept in jail just so nobody would learn that the mob had successfully co-opted 6 FBI agents in the Boston office. Okay, well, let's come to the Trump investigation. Flynn wiped out, reputation destroyed, Manafort in jail for the rest of his life over things that the FBI had previously thought about charging him with but dropped. He didn't do 1/10 in Ukraine what Biden and his kid have done, and we'll see if that comes out. Then we've got Roger Stone. I mean, I don't want to be interpreted as insulting Roger Stone and Jerome Corsi. Mueller had nothing on anybody. He was desperate to get people that had lost everything so he could get them to plead guilty. So when he submits his report, here comes the 448-page Mueller report on Trump-Russia investigation, complete with 9 guilty pleas. Guilty pleas to what? Well, they don't tell you guilty pleas. It had nothing to do with the investigation, just 9 guilty pleas. It's how the prosecutor makes it look like, in a PR sense, his investigation got the dirt. But here you have how many people were ruined, how many reputations destroyed, how many people financially wiped out over something that didn't happen. How does somebody even do that? Put yourself, do you have in your own existence, in your soul, do you have what you think it takes to target somebody who hasn't done anything related to what you're investigating, and then you set them up and you ruin them, you engage them, and you arrange for them to spend the rest of their lives in jail after wiping out almost all of that they have earned their whole lives, knowing they didn't do diddly squat? Could you do that? I couldn't. Now, maybe you and I don't have the killer instinct. I couldn't. My conscience would not permit me to live with myself. If I had put people in jail, had no business being there. If I had wiped them out. And then, George Papadopoulos told me, I interviewed him for the Limbaugh letter. He said that the FBI agents were telling his fiancée to abandon him, that he was in big trouble and he was going nowhere. And all this is supposed to be applying pressure on Papadopoulos to say what they want to hear, not the truth. Papadopoulos was set up. They hoped to be able to claim that him blabbing about Russia having dirt on Hillary was the reason this investigation started. Well, they had to plant that knowledge in his head. He didn't know any of this, and it never was true in the first place. So telling his fiancée to abandon him, and his Papadopoulos got big trouble. He's not going anywhere you want to go, stuff like, could you do that? If you're doing that in actually trying to get legitimately guilty and bad people off the street, yeah. But there's nobody guilty here. The target didn't do anything, i.e. Donald Trump. And they all knew that. Anyway, I'll take a break. Be back and continue after this. Hang on. Okay, here's Sam in Sarasota. His uncle was one of the 4 people in jail. It says here, your uncle served 33 years, and he didn't do it. He was not guilty, right?
Right. That's correct.
And how you knew this all along, right?
Oh yeah, we knew all along, Rush. There was no doubt whatsoever. This whole mess started in 1965, and the sinful part of it, not only did the 2 of them died in prison, then my uncle and another gent got out. They settled for $102 million. My uncle got $26 million. After a year and a half of trying to collect the money, because Mueller kept continuing it, they wouldn't release the money. Finally, a federal judge ended up paying the 2 survivors with interest. Now, here's the caveat, and here's the best asked question. These 4 were convicted. 3 of the 4 were given life sentences. Massachusetts had Old Sparky, the electric chair, at the time. So they were on death row. They were only allowed in general population for an hour a day. They didn't really communicate with anyone. They were only allowed 1 visitor every couple of weeks.
Hang on just a second. What was your uncle and the other 3, what were they accused of, and what were they convicted of?
They were accused of a gangland murder in 1965, and they were accused by a fellow by the name of Barboza. And Barboza was an FBI informant. He was also the first FBI informant ever to get placed in the witness protection program. He was the key guy in witness protection. Now, he fingered 4 guys who had nothing to do with this murder of Teddy Deegan in Chelsea, Mass. In 1965. These guys had nothing to do with it. They were just not liked by Barboza, and Barboza had to prove himself and make his bones with the feds. Well, after all was said and done, one of the federal agents, he just recently passed away in jail, and 2 of the other guys were tossed out. But Mueller didn't do about it. And through the Freedom of Information Act, a young reporter from the Boston Globe started this whole ball rolling. And Mueller's response was, we can't let these guys out because it would create such a black eye on the FBI. So
exactly. That's exactly. They were in jail, convicted for murder that they didn't do. And now Mueller didn't put them there, but he found out that they were innocent. He decided to keep them in jail because there were 6 FBI agents who were discovered to be on the mafia payroll in Boston, and that's what they wanted to protect.
Correct. You got it. You hit the nail right on the head.
So your uncle is in jail for 33 years for something he didn't do, and law enforcement knew it. And one of the guys involved in that is now the guy investigating Donald Trump.
Correct. But now let's not miss the point here.
What is the point?
Here's the point. Just a little deeper. Massachusetts got rid of the death penalty. These guys would have gotten the electric chair if it wasn't for the state of Massachusetts commuting the death sentence. So they said no.
Well, but as it is, even with that, 2 of them did die in captivity, right? They died in jail.
Mueller would let these guys go to the electric chair, Rush.
Right, I know. That's incredible.
It's incredible, isn't it?
And the reason why this has come up, Sam, I'm really glad you got through. Thank you for taking the time to call and endure all the busy signals to get through. The reason any of this matters today, if you're just joining us, William Barr, the Attorney General, has appointed a man by the name of John Durham to investigate the investigation of Donald Trump. Barr said under oath during congressional testimony that he's convinced the Trump campaign was spied on. Look, everybody knows that this investigation was a political operation, that it was not, there were no crimes that took place. It was not a legitimate counterintel. They knew the Russians hadn't colluded. Everybody knew it. It's one of the biggest political hoaxes and scandals, and it was a silent coup. Well, the reason why this Boston story is important is because the lawyer, the Connecticut U.S. attorney that's been appointed to investigate this, was involved in uncovering all of this and reporting all of this that went on in Boston. It's on his resume that he was an investigator. He also has uncovered some chicanery by the CIA in the course of his legal life. And the important thing about it is that unlike the lawyers on the Mueller investigation team of Trump, and unlike some of the law enforcement people of Boston story, this guy, upon learning what happened, did not sweep it under the rug to protect the reputation of law enforcement or to avoid giving them a black eye. He reported it and went public. And the Boston Globe did have a journalist with Freedom of Information Act pursuits that uncovered some of this. But an actual U.S. investigator found it and went public with it. That's the importance here. And it's not the only thing that's important. The other thing that's important is that it happened. Let me ask you a question. You're watching TV or you're reading the internet. You're consuming news. And all of a sudden you see a story on TV where somebody in law enforcement, could be the local police, it could be the FBI, it could be anybody, announces that they're accusing so-and-so with having done so-and-so. Isn't your natural assumption to believe law enforcement? Guy must have done it, you say to yourself. Don't misunderstand. I'm not being critical. I'm saying this is simply a way of life. I'm not being critical of anybody here. I'm just saying it's an advantage that prosecutors and law enforcement have, that whenever they accuse somebody, everybody believes it. Most people would think, why would they waste their time trying to get somebody who didn't do it? Must have done it. The guy must be guilty. It's just the automatic assumption that citizens make. And it's because law enforcement has earned the reputation it has. So when it is discovered that there is corruption, there's corruption in everything. When some of it's permanent, some of it's, just temporary and a one-time or two-time one-off. But whenever it's learned, it's shocking. Like this was in the Boston case. At any rate, when you put the pieces of this all together, it just says that this guy, Durham, is the right guy to ferret out what happened here, because he has a track record of not sweeping behavior that should be called out under the rug if it involves law enforcement. Let's take a break. Have to. Be back in just a sec.